Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our Digital Spotlight series. I am so excited to introduce you to our next guest. His name is Pierre, and he is the risk and credit professional. What's really exciting about having Pierre with us today is he's going to be talking about what Donald Super in the theory of careers is all about: the lifespan and the lifestyle and the changes that we go through in our life. Pierre is going to take us from where he started all the way to where he is today and where he plans on moving forward into the future. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this really exciting conversation. Welcome, Pierre, to our spotlight. I'm so excited to have you here today.
Thank you, and good morning, everybody. Thank you very much, Maria, for having me online on this Q&A session. And I'm really excited to kind of share some of the experience that I went through in my life. For some who don't know me, and most of you don't, I just turned 60. So I'm at the last stage of my career. I started almost 33, 34 years ago in New York City in banking, and I ended up now working in the financial services as a risk and credit manager. And you wanted to know more about how it all started. When I was a teenager growing up in the good old days of Beirut, I had many bankers in the family, and I'll be lying if I said I wasn't influenced by most of them. Some had really kind of very reputable professions at the time. So I was influenced right from the get-go, majored in finance, and then landed my first positions in the US in banking. I wasn't always a risk and credit guy, but to know banking is to know credit, because you're in the business of selling money and analyzing financials. Eventually, you become quite knowledgeable about the business, the industry, the language that bankers speak to one another. You go airborne. So I wasn't only confined in one territory. I went global. I started selling services to other banks. And this field is called correspondent banking. So banking at the time wasn't just credit cards or retail or just wholesale. It was just also selling to other banks, other services, payments, banks that probably reside in Australia or probably operate in Africa would always need accounts in other places, in Europe, in the US. So my job at the time, and we're talking about 30 years plus, was to kind of sell services and credit services to other banks worldwide. I did that for a good, I would say, 16 years. And of course, it went from one department or one function to another. And it was quite comprehensive. So as I said, credit, because you have to understand the language of banks and how you analyze them. You become a salesperson. You start cross-selling other services, especially if you work for a huge institution. You start also developing cultural affinities and understanding of other cultures and other maybe languages and countries and geopolitical risk. So all this kind of was my banking career.
That's amazing. That's really amazing. So I want to pause you for a minute and just really take a pause and digest what you've already told us. So let's go backwards right to where it all began. You talked about having role models in the family who were in banking, and you admit that, you know what, I was really, really impacted by their experiences, and that was a way for you to identify with that potential type of career. And we see this a lot with young people. And we see this in theories of career development and education, that we tend to look at our role models for guidance and for inspiration. But when you were back in those New York days, if you remember at the beginning of your career, you said that you started in New York from after growing up in Beirut. What would you say was the moment that you thought, this is what I want to be doing?
It was the global aspect of things. I mean, New York is a hub, a financial hub, and I worked for a relatively sizable institution, and it was the portfolio that I was put in charge of, the languages that I was using on a daily basis. In Europe, French, Middle East, you use Arabic, of course, English speaking countries, and so on and so forth. It wasn't confined to just one area. So boredom wasn't there. It was a lot of fun. There was excitement, especially if you start developing understanding of what banks do and the risk, how they mitigate the risk, how they package it, and ultimately how they sell it. And probably also sell the idea of, to kind of cover other institutions from a risk perspective, clearing perspective, payments perspective. So it was like a plethora of so many products that kind of made it very exciting. So I was very young. I learned a lot. I got trained, but most of the training was done on the job, trial and error. You make mistakes, you learn from your mistakes, and you move on. And then ultimately you get rewarded. If you do well, they put you on a plane and they tell you go bring in business.
That's
So it was
amazing.
that what propelled it.
And that's something that our students will only experience once they're on the job. What would you say, remembering those early days, would be, I wish somebody told me this when I was in classroom? What would those things be?
If you're passionate about something, if you are interested in something, ask. Don't be shy. Maybe at your age, you would be reluctant to ask questions. Ask. If your parents do not know how to answer, get somebody to guide you, and just go with what you really like and love. And in my classroom, I has, back in my high school days, there was no one to answer these questions. So, at the time, the country was in turmoil where I grew up. So, but luckily, I had cousins and uncles that knew about this field and they guided me.
That's great. Talk to us about the different job roles that you've held in the, 'cause so you said right at the beginning, you said, I'm 60 and I'm at what we would consider in the traditional sense of a career journey. I'm right at the end of what we think is a career journey. But coming from a career aspiring theorist, I see it as, wow, that next adventure that you're going to start in your career. But take us through the different job roles that you've held in the time of your career span so far?
If I were to do it in a semi-alphabetical order, or maybe from the very beginning, you arrive and then they give you a desk and they start putting you in charge of things. They kind of ask you to kind of opine, to write a letter. You make mistakes. You probably think you're Shakespeare, but no, you can make mistakes sometimes. You have to learn from your own mistakes. And then they give you a balance sheet and they ask you, well, you just graduated, Mr. Dickshop. Show us whether this institution is good or bad. And then you struggle, but you learn, you ask, it's a trial and error. And then you move on. And this is the best training, by the way. Learning on the job is the best way to learn any profession, any function. You just get to see the whole thing panoramically. It's just a matter of getting used to things. You look at the screen. What does a foreign exchange trader do on a daily basis when they buy and sell? When you see them on TV, they're shouting and they kind of yelling and they doing these sign languages. What does it mean? So you just go and part of your onboarding, you sit with every department for a few days and you get a feel for it. At the end of this onboarding, if you like something, you could probably ask to be located and placed there, or if there is no spot, you're there until something opens up. But this was the very beginning of it. Just get a feel of what the field is all about. And as I said, in banking specifically, you have to learn the language of banks. And what do banks do? They sell money. And if they sell money to a lousy entity, they could lose money.
Mm.
So when your bank account basically is really a bank that purchases your money. people don't look at it this way, but my bank account here in Dubai is because I sold that money to my bank. They're buying your money and they're selling it. It's very simple. Now,
So,
how do you, yeah.
sorry, great insight. I can almost hear the business and economics students saying, I want more, I want more. But keeping in mind, imagine, Pierre, I took all the business cards that you had that had Pierre Chivi written on them through the career journey. What what would they look like? What would the titles be on all these cards?
It would look like, if I remember, as I started as an assistant treasurer, maybe a title that doesn't exist anymore. And then I moved on to an assistant vice president, and then to a vice president, and to a group vice president. And it grows with your territory. And then they canceled the group vice president. And I became a VP again, vice president. And then I jumped from one function to another. Ultimately, at my present position in the financial services here in a company called Western Union, I'm a regional director. So this has been really the migration. If you wish, in my former profession in New York, I was probably more senior because I was a group vice president. At, with the level I'm doing, and the title I'm holding is probably less of a, how should I say, it's not as prominent or as senior as a title I held once in New York, but it's still very interesting. It doesn't matter, but this has been the progression.
And is it a linear progression in your industry, or is it kind of, it sounds almost like back and forth, up and down, round and round? How would you describe it?
I describe it, it's the really, it's the consequence of the progression and evolution of these industries, because we can no longer speak about one industry. The banking industry is really kind of changing, and banks or banking is no longer the way it used to be when I was a banker. So now they talk about in terms of fintech, financial technology, because technology has come to the fore. Many banks have disappeared or have shrunk or they probably merged. But in terms of lateral move, if you wish, it was a natural ascendant, growing evolution in terms of titles. Now, if you decide to move or jump from banking into an adjacent and similar industry, then titles will change. It's very, it's very normal.
Excellent. Talk to us a little bit about the language. So this is something our students think that the language is the academic language that they're learning a subject, but I almost believe it's different when you're in the industry. So what are some of the key terminology, the language? Give us kind of like a taster of what they can expect from this language of banking.
Language of banking, for instance. I'll just speak now. I'm going to put on my old hat of a banker. When you go and meet a banker, for instance, you, bit by bit, you develop a sense. You would have done your homework beforehand because you're going there to do business, hopefully to kind of convince them to open an account with you somewhere. Not a checking account, by the way. It's going to be a jumbo wholesale account where they can use it. You would notice that they, for instance, they lend money in a local currency, but some of the business is in dollars. So you could just maybe say, well, maybe you could have a shortfall there and I could lend you money on an overnight basis. So that's first stop, overnight. I'm lending money overnight. So me being big bank, I'm going to the smaller bank and saying, I want to lend you $1 or $2 or $3 million on an overnight basis. So at least you cover the gap because I notice it's in dollars. So at least, and you have some business in dollars and that would cover you. Instead of you using your dirham account or dirham assets and convert them into dollars, it could cost you. I also noticed that you have cross-border traffic, and cross-border means many currencies. How about we establish a foreign exchange limit for your institution? And we'll get the traders to speak to one another. I'll give you $5 million or the equivalent in many currencies. Now, if you need to use this facility to kind of buy another currency, that's possible.
That's
You could,
amazing. It's like learning a foreign language on its own. This is so exciting. You say it with such confidence. How much time would you say it took you to get to the stage that you're at where you feel confident to have this conversation and also to walk into a meeting and know that the agenda is to walk away with business, but also to come across as knowledgeable and have a good reputation as well?
well, I've been in business for a good 34, 35 years. The banking profession was really what made me today a credit and risk professional. How long did it take? You always learn, Maria. And it happens that I love. You can see a lot of books behind me, and I just told you I didn't read most of them. I read many of them. You have to read. You have to be interested because if you don't follow up on the news on a daily basis, you stop learning. I'll give you an example, and this has to sink in to all the students that will be watching me. If you move to any field, you are a student, whether you like it or not. When you finish college, you will always be a student. I read the Wall Street Journal every day. I read the Financial Times every day. I keep abreast through Bloomberg of what's happening because you have to see what's happening in every industry, in all industries. How long did it take me to master my banking skills? I would say a good 7, 8 years. And then to kind of really do well, another few years. Now, so if you wish, I became a good generalist. You don't have to master what the traders do, whether they're selling fixed income or they're selling syndicated loans. I'm not going to get into that because it's a bit it's a bit difficult for them to understand at this stage. Or selling or doing, you have to understand a bit of what each department does on a daily basis. What is that they're selling? How do they make money? And once you understand it, it's fine. Being a good generalist, that doesn't mean you don't have to be a specialist in a certain field or two, but that's it. You take it from there.
That's excellent. Now, talk to me about the lifestyle of your career. So that's another thing that I'm always very interested when I meet professionals is young people don't understand that they're not just choosing an occupation, they're choosing the lifestyle that the occupation will inflict on their lives as well. So being at your stage of life right now, you've had family, you've had children, and your career, your occupations have molded the well-being that you've probably experienced in every level of your career. Can you talk to us about the lifestyle of the industry that you're in and the impact it's had on Pierre Chivi?
Before I get to this question, it's very interesting one. There are two sides to this banking thing. There's a commercial banking and there is an investment banking. Commercial banking is the one that I kind of followed. And I was a commercial banker, although I was also an international banker. There is an investment banker. And investment banking is the one that you see in the movies like Wall Street and what have you. And the investment bankers spend sometimes 70, 80, 90 hours a week working. Their lifestyle is quite hectic. And how does it impact their families? You could just do the math. My own profession, the way it molded me, I used to travel a lot, Maria. Sometimes I would be 2.5, 3 weeks at a time traveling around the globe, Africa, Middle East, Europe, and what have you. So I was like a good 3 months outside my comfort zone at home, traveling. And it wasn't bad, but it wasn't always good because you could miss birthdays, you could miss some holidays, a few things that you have to take into account. Now, professionally, it was very rewarding. Family understood, and the kids were young. So, but going overboard, kind of going abroad and being airborne all the time had its merit and had its rewards. And I had to kind of balance it as much as possible. Not an exact science, because as I said, sometimes you have to sacrifice, a birthday here and see your kid grow before your eyes. So yeah, there was a lot of travel, and impacted us and impacted me a bit. It would make you feel guilty at times. Now, when you go back, you have to make sure you have more than a gift to keep everybody happy. The daddy is back or the husband is here. So
Of
I don't know if
course.
I've answered it. It's a bit
Yeah, no,
touchy.
definitely. And this is exactly the type of concept that we don't learn when we're students. We only learn when we're working. And sometimes when we're really aspirational and ambitious and want to kind of get to the top, we don't realize that whenever we say yes to our profession, there's something that we're saying no to or something that we're putting along the side. But what's great is to have your insight, because now you're at that really amazing stage of life where you're able to look back and go, wow, I'm here today, but look at the different stories I've experienced along this journey. So let's fast forward to COVID-19, where we are right now. So at the time of this video interview, we're all in lockdown, we're all being quarantined, we're all working from home. Of course, there's those frontline workers who we're calling our amazing superheroes having to go to work still. But for all of us that are working from home, digital technology has impacted our careers and our industries in a way that I don't believe we ever thought could happen so quickly. It was always the future of careers, but now we're living the future. How would you say that technology has evolved the work that you do, and how has it enhanced the work that you do or maybe hindered the work that you do?
If I have to kind of go backwards, I recall using a fax maybe 2 years into my career, and it was like, wow, fax.
So
And then
to put into concepts right now, there will be
yes,
people that have no idea what a fax machine is. So tell us what that was. I know what it was.
fax.
I'm
A
embarrassed to say
fax
I know what
is
it was.
really is a document that you transmit through what looks like a printer from one side of the world to another, and that's it.
It's
Very
kind of the
simple.
old-fashioned email, isn't it?
Exactly. To put it differently, correct. Then writing letters, for instance, having a secretary typing those things for you because I couldn't type or I was spoiled. Everybody was spoiled. Cell phones, no cell phones. So it was good basically because nobody would bother you after hours to call you. But then cell phones came in, and cell phones were bulky. Some of them were like half a kilo. I remember carrying this around the world. Wouldn't work all the time. Analog signal, and then bit by bit we started having smartphones, and then email. Of course, well, email came prior to that. Email, you click on it and it disappears. And just what? Where did it go? Email. What's an email now is well, it's all technology. Of course, SMSs and all those, and now the age of what have you. It's amazing. It's amazing how spoiled we are now with this technology. Everything has become easier. Abundance of information. If you want to know about what banking is, what is not, just go and Google it. And what's the difference between what I just told you about investment banking, commercial banking? Very easy. Back then, you had to go and buy a book. Who buys books nowadays? Everything is digitized. It's just these are very interesting times. This, if you want to call it the third or fourth industrial revolution, it's amazing and it keeps evolving. It's so if I may answer something that you haven't asked, with all this technology and where we are right now, and this global nasty bug that is upon us, if somebody has a certain love for sciences, major in scientific field, in the languages of the world, there is one universal language that will take you forward no matter where you go. It's called mathematics. Study mathematics and become a banker. Doesn't matter. Some bankers are mathematicians because they could analyze charts in a funny way. You could become anywhere else. Study languages, the normal languages. But since we're talking about the digital world and technology, Mathematics should be one a sub-major or a minor or a major, and mix it with something else. Mix it with French, with Shakespearean English, with finance, no matter where you go. This will take you forward no matter where you go, guys.
That's
Remember that.
amazing. That's amazing. And just as we're coming to the end of our interview, I always say this, but I could talk to you forever. So much to learn. Now you're working as a very, I mean, you're right at the top of your career, and you are obviously working with newcomers all the time, people joining the industry. What are some of the things that you look at the younger generation and say, wow, they're really ahead of the game? And what are some of the tips that you can offer a young person considering joining the industry that you see as, I just wish that together with their knowledge, they could have this one thing?
Banking is, well, was my love, probably my first love in terms of career. But banking is changing. By the time the kids are going to graduate and go to college, and by the time they finish college, banking would have probably also gone backwards or probably shrunk. The world is changing completely. Pick an industry that you really like, a career that you love, be passionate about it. I gave you a hint because of the world we're in and the technology. Move into scientific stuff and mix it with something else. That will give you options. By the time you graduate, if you want to work for a Procter& and Gamble or a Coca-Cola, you're going to realize they're no longer their former selves. Well, then how about Facebook? How about the Twitters of the world? How about doing this and that? Give yourself more than an option. Don't be confined to one field because the world is changing at a very fast pace. I don't know what's going to happen 5 or 6 years from now, but I know what's going to happen next year. More people will be moving into these tiny startups, becoming entrepreneurs. Kids probably graduating and they start companies on their own. This is the wave of the future. With coronavirus around us, I think the way we work is going to change dramatically. We still haven't really discovered what will the society of tomorrow look like. Be very open-minded about your careers, about what you like or you dislike. And I want you to love more than a field. Major in something and minor in a couple of other things. That's okay. Struggle, study. It would serve you well. Trust me.
Amazing. Thank
And
you. Thank you. Thank you, Pierre. Tell us about what's next. I mean, you're at the point where people that think about their career, they think, I cannot wait to get to the stage that Pierre Chivi is at, because we think, wow, that's what we're striving for. But I know that there's always a new adventure. What are you kind of discovering, or what are some of your hopes for this next adventure?
I go back now to what I just told you. The next discovery is going to be very scientific. It could be quantum computing. It hasn't arrived. It's almost there. It's going to be 5G. It's going to be artificial intelligence. Everywhere you go, businesses, jobs are being disrupted. Remember this word, kids and gentlemen and ladies, everybody, disruption. The world around us is being disrupted by these scientific discoveries. And I just gave you a few. So that's why I insist and I urge you, keep it in the back of your mind. If you want to have a decent job and a nice, bright future, double major, triple major. I don't care. You're still young and you have the world ahead of you. This is the world of tomorrow. It's going to change. And jobs are going to be for those that can really understand the world in a different way. Not the world of 30 years ago where we had no technology and jobs were traditional. You go here, you sell, you buy, you bank, no internet, no this, no that. Now things are changing. Things are easier. Information is there. Is there's a glut of information. Remember what happened to the Encyclopedia Britannica? One discovery, Wikipedia just kind of dislodged, disrupted the business model. And then this is an entity that has been around for 250 years,
Of
as
course.
old as the British Empire. One discovery, one startup disrupted it. Remember this: study more than one field, and remember the buzzword disruption. You will
This
be disrupted if you don't disrupt the world ahead.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Pierre. So that brings us right to the end. What an exciting spotlight. Thank you for all of your knowledge, your wisdom, for sharing your life story.
Thank
And
you.
I look forward to seeing you on the next adventure and hearing about your amazing adventures ahead towards this digital disruption, as you described it. That's so exciting. Thank you to everybody for tuning in today and for watching Pierre Chivi, who is the professional talking about risk and credit, and of course, his story and journey of his career starting all the way in New York in the world of banking. I look forward to seeing you all at our next upcoming Digital Spotlight. Thank you for watching.